Hey guys, thanks for being here. We're going to be solving quadratic inequalities as our first full lesson here, okay? Once again, you're looking at some vocabulary, axis of symmetry, completing the square. That'll facilitate your development with this material. Now, just to remind you, I guess what I can do here is show you that on Schoology, okay, you do have access to a teacher's edition textbook so that you can look up the sections we're covering, practice exercises, answers, and vocabulary. So here's your class. Okay, here's the textbook folder. Okay, if I click here on the side, here's textbook information. Here's the textbook itself. So if I click it, okay, it takes a while, but it'll open up the whole PDF. You can look for that vocabulary in the glossary, and that's the whole semester. Okay. All right. If you have questions, come see me. The bulk of what we're supposed to be covering is encapsulated by a problem just like this, right? Solve the inequality. So there's multiple steps here, okay, the bulk of which you know what to do. So I'm going to get to the point where you don't know what to do. So before that, let's cover what you do know how to do. So to solve this, you need to basically regard this as an equation, okay, a quadratic equation. So let's go and start that process. All right, x squared plus 4 equals negative 11. Right, so this should look a lot more familiar to you guys. Now here you'd add the you'd add 11 to both sides, so it cancels out here, so you do get a 0. So you're left with, this is plus 15 equals 0. So now that it's set equal to 0, as you've done many times before, is you can solve for it, in particular using the quadratic formula. So I'm not gonna go through the whole process, but I will give you the beginning steps you should already be familiar with. You should identify A to be negative 8, B to be negative 14, and C to be 15. All right. Now, if this is a little new to you, then you're going to need to. Alright, so you got A, B, and C, and you want to plug into the quadratic formula, which will give you the zeros, the solution, right, to the inequality, essentially. Now, of course, we've turned it into an equation, so it'll give you the solution to the equation, and then we'll address this inequality bit, okay, which you may not be familiar with, and that's where I come in. But anyways, you want to go and plug these values into this formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 2a. And now, some of you guys had it mastered since last semester. You've gotten an opportunity since Friday and today, okay, to look at this process. So make sure you got this down. So I'm going to skip this whole process because I don't want to eat up the time with that, but you would get x equals 0.75 or what is it, negative 2.5. okay, at the very minimum, besides doing the practice problems, okay, that are recommended to you. And let's look at what we're talking about here. Okay, you see here under weekly lesson plans, if you click here, right, it says Algebra 2 recommended exercise, so I click there. Okay, it gives you specific problems. In this case, you want to practice as much as possible, so all exercises are recommended, but in the future I'll maybe pick out a few in particular. Okay, so anyways, where we at? We've got 0.75, negative 2.5, okay, as our solutions once you compute that. Now after that, okay, we got to remember that we're dealing with an inequality. So where do we go from here? Here's one option, and here's the universal one that will apply in this class. Okay, is the following. So we'll come up with a number line as such. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide it up by these two values, right? So negative 2.5. So we'll put 0 here. We'll put negative 2.5. And we'll put 0.75 about there. Alright, let me see here. Alright, 0.75. Now, this isn't drawn to scale. Obviously, they're not equidistant. However, this is going to give me some room so I can operate here with, okay? And as a matter of fact, 0, at least for the moment, doesn't need to be there. I think it might actually confuse you. So we'll just create a number line with these two specific values, okay? Now the reason I'm putting open circles, if you go back to our study of inequalities, is since there's no equal to, you definitely have open circles. Now what we're going to do is we're going to test out some values. So in between, right here, we do have 0 luckily. So we'll test him out. Over here, the most convenient number or value is 1. And over here, there's different options. But what can I go with? I guess for the sake of guessing, I'll go with negative 3. Maybe negative 10 would be more convenient. Who knows? Alright. Alright. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to go ahead and test these 3 spots out. Okay. Now if it was an equation, these would be it. Done and done. Right. But it is an inequality, so it's greater than or less than, so we've got to kind of toy with these values. So what I'm going to do here, okay, I'm going to come back to our original inequality. Alright, let's see here. Let me borrow this guy here. Alright, so here's the original. And I'm simply going to substitute these values in for x and see what that produces. Okay. So we're going to have... Alright, so now that we've got our original inequality, we've got our 3 test points. Let's go and test them. You can do this manually, but like always, the calculator will be that much quicker and maybe more reliable here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that in the calculator. Okay. Now I'm going to use a calculator not to graph it or do anything fancy like that, but basically just to tell me if what I have is true or false. Okay. Alright. I'm going to plug in negative 3 squared minus 14x plus 4. As far as the inequalities, you hit control equal sign. Okay, and I think it's that one. And then negative 11. Let me double check that. So minus 14 times negative 3, minus 14 times negative 3. Then we got plus 4. Plus 4 is greater than negative 11. Okay. So now if I hit enter, it tells me it's false. Okay, so that means if I come up here, this interval region right here, okay, from here to there, does not work. Okay, so that's out of the question. So now I'm going to come back to my calculator. All right, I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste, and now I'm going to switch this test value to a 0. Okay, so put a 0 there, put a 0 there, and hit enter. Okay, this one is true, so that one works out. So this interval here works out. Now let's take a look at this guy right here. Okay, let's plug in a 1. So once again, right, I've got the first one, put in a 1, take the -2 and put in a 1, hit enter, and it tells me it's false. So this region does not work, so this is the winning interval. Okay, so then the last thing I want to say is that x equals, okay, or better yet, let's write it this way. The solution set is, right, all values that are what? Less than 0.75, but greater than -2.5. Guys, that's it. Thank you for your time. Take good notes, and tomorrow, after the warm-up, if you still have questions, comments, or concerns, we'll address them then. Okay, see you tomorrow.